The top business stories live from the Sky News City studio. Breaking news this hour, a member of the Bank of England's Monetary Policy Committee calls for more interest rate rises. BMW to make its new electric Mini in Oxford after securing millions of pounds in funding from the UK taxpayer. Plus, the GMB union claims 12,500 jobs are likely to go at Wilko if all the stores close next month. Good afternoon, this is Business Live with me, Ian King. We start with some breaking news this afternoon. Catherine Mann, one of the main hawks on the Bank of England's Monetary Policy Committee, has said that she does not favour a pause in the bank's recent run of interest rate rises. Her comments come after three of her colleagues, the Governor Andrew Bailey, his deputy Sir John Cunliffe and the bank's chief economist Hugh Pill, have all indicated that interest rates were close to their peak. Speaking to the Canadian Association for Business Economics, Dr Mann said she did not favour pausing interest rate rises when inflation was still so high. She said, to pause or hold the policy rates lower for longer risks inflation becoming more deeply embedded, which would then require more tightening in total to both change inflation itself and to wring out the embedded inflation that comes from the sustained duration above target. This is why I would rather err on the side of over-tightening. But if I'm wrong and inflation decelerates more quickly and activity deteriorates more significantly, I will not hesitate to cut interest rates. I'll have more on this later on this hour in the markets. To Liverpool now, where the new leader of the Trades Union Congress has accused the Conservative Party of presiding over a broken country where nothing works. Paul Nowak told the TUC conference that the government didn't care about the state of public services. He pointed to problems such as sewage in rivers and the school concrete fiasco as proof that the country needs urgent political change.
Let's start by closing every single tax loophole like those for non-doms. Levying VAT on fees for private schools and beefing up revenue and customs so we can clamp down on those who cheat on tax. And why stop there? We could have a proper windfall tax on the energy companies, and that would raise £2 billion extra this year alone. We could ask the richest 140,000 people to pay just a little bit more and raise another £10 billion this year.
Our chief political correspondent John Craig is at the TUC conference in Liverpool. John, I gather Sir Keir Starmer is sitting down with the brothers this evening. That should be a comradely affair.
Yeah, right. Yes, what's happening this evening is it's the traditional dinner attended by shadow cabinet members and the TUC General Council. That's the leaders of most of the big unions. Now, Sir Keir is likely to be detained in Parliament for a good hour or so yet because of course, there is a statement in the House of Commons which Sir Keir has got to respond to, and I can tell you that the Prime Minister has just got to his feet to give a statement on the G20 summit that he's just attended.
Including many British citizens. Mr. Speaker, I've just returned from the G20 summit in India. And for the record, let me declare that, as is a matter of public record, I and my family are of Indian origin. My wife and her family are Indian citizens with financial interests in India. At the summit, I had three aims. First, to increase diplomatic pressure on Russia and call out their shameful disruption of global food supplies in the Black Sea. Yeah. Second, to show the world that democracies like the United Kingdom, not authoritarian regimes, are leading the fight on global challenges like development and climate change. And third, to strengthen ties and forge new partnerships to deliver jobs, growth and security for the British people. Mr. Speaker, the world faces a moment of danger, volatility and increasingly rapid change. But even as most G20 leaders came together in Delhi in a spirit of cooperation, one did not. For 2 years now, Putin has lacked the courage to face his G20 peers. Day after day, his actions cause horrendous suffering in Ukraine, violating the UN Charter, threatening European security, and disrupting global energy supplies. The spillovers have driven up prices here at home, and they are hurting people all around the world. Russia's withdrawal from the Black Sea Grain Initiative exposes their willingness to spread that suffering further. While Putin stalls, making unmeetable demands, he's destroying Ukraine's ports and grain silos. In just 1 month, Russia has destroyed over 270,000 tons of grain, enough to feed 1 million people for a year. And I can tell the House today that thanks to declassified intelligence, we know the Russian military targeted a civilian cargo ship in the Black Sea with multiple missiles on the 24th of August, demonstrating just how desperate Putin is. At the G20, leaders united in calling out the human suffering caused by Putin's war. Ukraine has the right to export its goods through international waters, and they have the moral right to ship grain that is helping to feed the world. The UK is working with partners to get grain to those who need it most. We'll provide £3 million for the World Food Programme, building on earlier contributions to President Zelensky's Grain from Ukraine initiative. We're using our intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance capabilities to monitor Russian activity in the Black Sea, so we can call them out if we see they're preparing further attacks on civilian shipping or infrastructure, and attribute attacks if they happen. And later this year, we're hosting a UK Global Food Security Summit to put in place solutions for the long term. Mr. Speaker, I spoke to my friend President Zelensky just before the summit. Backed by our support, Ukraine's counter-offensive is making hard-won progress. We will continue to stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes, until we see a just and durable peace that respects their sovereignty and territorial integrity. That's the only possible outcome to Putin's illegal war, and Ukraine, with our support, will prevail. And on my second aim, Mr. Speaker, we showed at the G20 that it is the UK and our partners, not authoritarian actors, that offer the best solutions to the global challenges we face. We're playing our part to stabilise the global economy, control inflation, and fuel future growth. The latest ONS figures show the UK is leading the way, growing faster out of the pandemic than any other major European economy, demolishing the false narratives that we've heard on the other side of this House. And we're also leading the way on development assistance. Instead of loading countries with debt, we're calling for fundamental reforms of the World Bank. When I met the World Bank president, I underlined the UK's desire to see the bank become more efficient and responsible, sweating its balance sheet to deliver more support where it's needed. We're also leading calls at the G20 to safely harness new technologies to support growth and development, and we're leading action to tackle climate change. Mr. Speaker, while some in Westminster denigrate the UK's record on climate issues, out there in the world, we are rightly seen as a global leader. We've cut emissions faster than any other G7 country, with low-carbon sources now providing over half our electricity. We're providing billions for the global energy transition, including through our pioneering Just Energy Transition partnerships. And at the G20, I made a record commitment of over £1.6 billion for the Green Climate Fund, the single biggest international climate pledge the UK has ever made. Finally, Mr. Speaker, my most important aim in Delhi was to deliver on the priorities of the British people. In a changing world, we're using our Brexit freedoms to build new relationships with economies around the world. Since I became Prime Minister, we've joined the CPTPP, the most dynamic trading bloc in the world. We've launched new partnerships with Canada, Australia, Japan and the US, covering trade and economic security. We've secured agreements with France, Albania and Turkey and others to stop illegal migration. And at the G20, we went further. We signed a new strategic partnership with Singapore to boost jobs, growth and our security. And I held warm and productive discussions with Prime Minister Modi on strengthening our relationship in defence, technology and a free trade deal between our nations. Mr. Speaker, I also met Premier Li of China. The whole House is rightly appalled about reports of espionage in this building. The sanctity of this place must be protected, and the right of members to speak their minds without fear or sanction must be maintained. We will defend our democracy and our security. So I was emphatic with Premier Li that actions which seek to undermine British democracy are completely unacceptable and will never be tolerated. I also emphasised the UK's unyielding commitment to human rights, and I was clear on the importance of maintaining stability and international law as the basis for stable relations. China is a permanent member of the UN Security Council, the world's second largest economy and the world's largest emitter of carbon dioxide, and has growing influence on others, notably Russia. One of my messages to Premier Li was that China should use their influence to call on Russia to end its aggression against Ukraine. The G20 showed a common purpose on food security, and we need to see this in other areas. Mr. Speaker, this government has acted decisively to improve our security, blocking China's involvement in critical areas like civil nuclear power, semiconductors, and 5G. And I pay tribute to the tireless work of our security services. We will shortly set out our response to the Intelligence and Security Committee's report on China. In November last year, the government set up a new Defending Democracy task force. Its mission is to reduce the risk to the UK's democratic processes, institutions and society, and ensure they're secure and resilient to threats of foreign interference. The importance of that work is clear for all to see. And crucially, in taking this approach, we are aligned with each and every single one of our Five Eyes allies and our G7 partners. Because by speaking frankly and directly, we will ensure our messages are heard clearly and that our interests and values are protected and promoted. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, at a time of rapid change, we are bringing British values and British leadership to bear on the biggest global challenges. As one of the fastest growing major economies, the second largest contributor to NATO, and a global leader in everything from climate to tech to development, I'm proud of the United Kingdom's leadership. And it is through that leadership, working with our allies and partners, that we will increase our security, grow our economy, and deliver on the priorities of the British people. And I commend this statement to the House.
So that was the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak with his report to the House of Commons on what was said at the G20. We're going to go back now to our chief political correspondent, John Craig, who's at the TUC conference. John, before we were so rudely interrupted there, you were telling me what Keir Starmer was likely to be saying to the TUC this evening.
Well, he's going to arrive late because, as we've seen, he's in the House of Commons responding to the Prime Minister's statement. I thought there was a lot about climate in there and not much about trade from Rishi Sunak. But Sir Keir has already today been hitting back at criticism from the leader of Unite, Sharon Graham, who's talked about Labour under Sir Keir as a 1990s tribute act. He said no today. Before setting off, he said that the Labour Party was looking to the future and there was common ground. But this afternoon, Ian, in the hall here, we've heard some pretty hard-hitting speeches about opposition to anti-strike laws. Paul Novak also went on to talk about various demands on the Labour government. We're hearing a lot of demands from the union leaders here, what they want to hear from the Labour government. And yet, Sir Keir and Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor, are not giving much away at this stage. So they will listen to him tonight. But he's not likely to give them everything they want by any means.
All right, thanks, John. Now, today marks the beginning of London International Shipping Week, the world's biggest annual gathering of global maritime leaders. The focus this year is a call for greater government investment to help the industry decarbonise. Well, joining me now are Chris Shirling-Rook, he's the Chief Executive of Maritime UK, and Ian Percy, Chief Executive of Artemis Technologies and a double Olympic sailing gold medalist. Welcome to you both. Chris, let me start with you. As an industry, you're predicted to grow by 16% between now and 2025. That doesn't sound too bad given the economic backdrop.
I think you're absolutely right. This is the wonderful thing about maritime. We're a really resilient industry, especially in the UK. 95% full of our food, fuel supplies, water. So we have to be resilient, and we are growing. And again, we also have to decarbonise.
Chris, you're talking about decarbonisation a lot this week. How much is it going to cost to reach net zero by 2050?
Well, by 2050, we can actually do it sooner than that, Ian. If you really... Maritime UK, we can really focus on decarbonisation. We can create vessels, such as the Artemis one behind me, the best of British. Net zero, really pioneering the technology which we think will drive
Gentlemen, I'm so sorry. We keep losing what you're saying to us. I think we're going to have to try again another day on this one. I do apologise. Thanks very much indeed. Sorry about that. Not been our day, has it? Still to come here on Business Live. We'll have a look at how the markets have done this Monday afternoon. Don't go away.
I'm Inzamam Rashid and I'm Sky's North of England correspondent, telling stories from this culturally rich region I call home.
It's going to become very similar to other places and lose its unique qualities.
It's steeped in history.
If the Taliban found your family, what would happen?
I think they're just going to straight away execute them.
There are issues of racism in all levels of cricket.
I was on the balcony a couple of times. I was nearly gone.
Football is a joy to watch, and when people are disappointed, you can feel the hate.
I just felt physically sick because I was like, that's really in my system.
We take you to the heart of the stories that shape our world. Even before the pandemic, GPs were pleading for help. Government expects more face-to-face contact with patients in return.
Men, they want to force you doing something which you don't want to do. Just because you're homeless and you're looking for a warm place to sleep.
We give a voice to communities often unheard and unserved from a region with a distinct history and global impact.
Fly Emirates, fly better. Fly Emirates, fly better. Thank you.
Well, the oil price has this afternoon hit a fresh 10-month highest. Data from China has raised hopes of higher demand for the rest of the year. At one point, Brent crude hit $91.45 a barrel, which was the highest since the 17th of November last year. As you can see, it's currently changing hands at around $90.51 a barrel. That's a very slightly lower, about 1/7% lower on the session. On the foreign exchange markets, some interesting moves there today. The US dollar very much on the back foot today. Big drop off against the Japanese yen. Sterling's enjoyed gains against the greenback. It's currently ahead by 0.5%. Pound also up 1/6% against the euro. The single currency, meanwhile, up nearly 2/5% against the dollar. On the equity markets, well, European equities have made a largely positive start to the week. I think we can show you the continental European indices. No, we can't. Well, I can tell you they've all finished in positive territory anyway. Here in London, the FTSE 100 has actually finished up 0.25% there. Gains for the miners being balanced out by losses in some of the big dollar earners. Obviously, that on the back of the weaker dollar. The leading blue chip faller today is AstraZeneca. It's clipped 10 points off the FTSE on its own, off by more than 3% there, as you can see. That follows a report in the Mail on Sunday yesterday that Pascal Soriot, the company's highly regarded chief executive, has told friends he's planning to step down. Outside the FTSE 100, the house builder Vistry is the leading gainer following a trading and strategic update. The shares were ahead by 13% at one point, while the private equity firm Bridgepoint continues to be wanted after the acquisition it announced last week. We covered that on the day, of course. Over on Wall Street, all of the main stock indices are in positive territory right now. You can see the Nasdaq there up nearly 0.75%. Things pretty quiet, although it has to be said ahead of Wednesday's US inflation data. Among the individual features, the chip supplier Qualcomm is up by some 3.5% after it signed a deal to supply Apple with 5G chips until 2026. So joining me now is Janet Mui, the head of market analysis at RBC Brewin Dolphin. Janet, great to see you. Let's start with these comments from Catherine Mann. She does seem slightly at odds with some of her colleagues on the MPC.
Yeah, hi, Ian. Thanks for having me. I think it is right to sound hawkish, given where inflation currently is still 3 times the official target. And, you know, we heard from the bank's chief economist and also the governor saying that we are near the end of the hiking cycle. But it doesn't mean that we're at the peak or, you know, there couldn't be any more rate increases. So the market is still pricing in another 25 basis point rate increase, right? So I think it makes sense for Catherine Mann to sound hawkish. And I do think that there is scope for further rate increases, maybe 1 or 2. And markets is certainly not really pricing in rate cuts for 2024. So I think ultimately we have to be data dependent. I think there is hope that inflation will slow, but perhaps not to 2% until at least 2025. So I think it is right to actually assume that the interest rate environment will still be pretty tight.
Yeah, and of course, with these moves in the oil price over the last month, the August inflation number is actually likely to be up on July, which is not what the MPC wants to see.
Yeah, I think energy price rebound is actually one of the key risks out there. Because as you mentioned already, Brent crude oil price is up about $90 per barrel at the moment. And we also see upward pressure on natural gas prices because there are some strikes action in key ports in Australia. So I think there are reasons to be cautious. And you mentioned that we're looking forward to the US inflation numbers as well. And in fact, economists are looking at a further reacceleration in the headline CPI number from 3.2% to 3.6%. So again, that last mile to that 2% inflation target is proving to be difficult, and that higher oil prices is not going to help.
Yeah, inflation doesn't go down in a straight line, as we've now discovered. What's going on Wall Street this afternoon? Tesla caught your eye.
Yes, I think the stock is up over 7% last time I checked. And particularly, it was driven by a bullish stock price upgrade by Morgan Stanley. So basically, they have upgraded their share price target over the next 12 months from $250 to $400. So a Tesla reached a peak of, I think, slightly over $400 back in 2021. So the analyst is expecting we're going to reach that peak again. And particularly, that is because of the he sees that there is going to be support from artificial intelligence, particularly from that supercomputer called Dojo that Tesla has. And of course, we know that Tesla has a lot of proprietary data on driving. It has great software. So it is actually a leader in training all this data in this AI model. So Morgan Stanley sees that there's a potential $500 billion addition to the market value, which investors are not yet appreciated, because it actually compares Tesla to Amazon back then, when Amazon, it was selling goods online, but actually the profit driver right now is the Amazon Web Service, so it's a software provider. So Morgan Stanley sees that comparison, Tesla actually now selling cars, but in the future it will be driving more revenue and profit from the software provider.
All right, Janet, got to leave it there, I'm afraid. Good to see you as ever. Thanks for joining me. That's it from me. I'm back at 11:30 tomorrow morning with our morning edition of Business Live. Very much hope to see you then. In the meantime, do stay tuned. Coming up after this short break, it's the News Hour with Mark Austin. Cheerio.